Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of Here with Cynthia. I'm so glad you're here. I'm excited to share stories from just a diverse group of individuals that are on their path of self-realization. The purpose behind the podcast is simply to share these inspiring stories of these amazing human beings who I've been blessed to come across in my life, that I just want to share this story with you. I want to just dive into conversation, pick some of their brains, and then you get to choose like whatever little nuggets of wisdom you want to pull from it and just be a part of the conversation. Maybe it will inspire you to go and have deep, meaningful conversations with your friends and to journey inward and figure out what the heck is going on in your heart and your mind so that you can show up more powerfully in the world. Today, I'm just excited to share the conversation I had with my friend Nelson, dear friend of mine. I hope that you enjoy.
Well, first I want to say thank you so much for jumping on this with me, for saying yes, for being one of the first to say yes and to be a part of this. It really means a lot to me that you are. Just want you to know how much it means to me that you're here, that you're willing to share your story and be on my podcast. It's the first one. So thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So let's go ahead and just jump right into it. I want you to just tell me, give me a little intro on who Nelson is.
Who Nelson is?
Yeah.
Nelson is a dude who grew up in Los Angeles, California, San Fernando Valley. I have two loving parents that are still together to this day. 40-something anniversary has just been celebrated. I have two older siblings, so I'm the youngest of three. I have had my trials and tribulations throughout life. Clearly, I'm still here, which is an amazing thing. But without them, I definitely don't think that I would be the person I am today. So I have a lot of gratitude and compassion for my past self, which has allowed me to kind of transcend into who I am today. And that's really led to the multitude of steps that I've taken in the growth process. And I've traveled the world a little bit. That's where we met in a different country, Bali, on a dance floor.
Yes.
And that too was a huge stepping stone for me. And so that's a little bit of who I am.
It's funny. I didn't realize the similarities between us, that your parents have been together for 40 plus years, mine too, and we're both the youngest of three. And both at home with our parents right now. So.
Yes. That's an interesting thing, the being at home with the parents. Because to be completely honest, I don't know if there's anywhere else that I would rather be right now than at home with my parents. Your parents and my parents are probably similar in age, like late 60s. And being here is comforting, and knowing that they're safe is comforting, and being able to help them and provide for them is actually a really good thing, in my opinion. And so I'm not embarrassed at all to be home with my parents.
That's good. And I guess I want to just throw it in there for anyone watching this who's from the future. We are currently in a pandemic. COVID-19 has basically just shut down the world, and we're all figuring it out. And with the pandemic being something that affects mostly the elderly, definitely I feel what you're saying there. I have similar feelings where I'm just grateful that I get to be here. It all feels right, in that I was meant to be here at this time. I've taken a big role in helping out with, being the one to go out and do the groceries, and just also not just doing groceries, but I think that we're keeping each other company, and we're the three of us either playing games together or having conversation, and just keeping things light in the house has been really cool. And we'll get into it as we go through these questions. Certainly some of that growth process that I've gone through too personally has been what has allowed this time to be so good. Because I don't think the past self, if this was even me 8 months ago, 10 months ago, I wonder how we would have been handling this situation. It might have felt a lot harder, and it might have been way, way more challenging. So grateful for all the steps that got me here to be able to be around my parents and like say with 100% like honesty that I enjoy their company.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I am right there with you on everything that you said. You know, this is an amazing time for all of us to get in touch with, you know, our family members. And I think this is something that we're going to get into, you know, is the relationship with our parents. And this has been an amazing opportunity for me to just grow that relationship with my parents, because at one time it was definitely shaky.
All right, so why don't we just jump right in here? One of the things that I'm really interested in learning is I want to connect to just like a diverse group of people and hear their stories, learn, you know, what are the steps that they've taken in their life to transform their lives, to overcome obstacles. Mostly it's that inward journey. It's the one that I've gone for the last 6+ years. And it didn't all happen at once. It's this slow progression to where I am now. And there have been milestones along the way and people that have come into my life or practices that I've picked up that have really helped and shaped who I am right now. And along the way, I've met people like you and others that are on their path. Like, you know, where each of us is on our own separate journey, but we can still relate to one another in really powerful ways. And I think it's by sharing stories that we get to do that. And so for me, I just want to like pick the brains of all my friends and hear more about where, you know, your history, where you came from, some of the breakthroughs that you've had, what you practice in your life that keeps you balanced, that keeps you growing, those sort of things. So just want to start with, you know, who you are in terms of like what your childhood was like, where you grew up. You mentioned Los Angeles. If you want to just kind of get into a little bit of that for me.
Yeah, so I grew up in Los Angeles, California, the San Fernando Valley, Canoga Park, born and raised my entire life. Same house, except for when I would travel around. I moved up to the Bay for a little bit for college, and then obviously to Asia. But growing up was a very interesting part of my life, and I didn't fully recognize how pivotal it was until I actually like got in touch with myself and started to dive deeper into why I am who I am and how I became this way. You know, I'm not going to say that my childhood was difficult because there was always food on the table. My parents were always there. They were very loving and caring, clothes on my back, you know, roof over my head. So I never had to worry in terms of that. But the caveat was, and this is like still very difficult for me to this day to discuss, is there was, I wouldn't say a lot of physical abuse because I don't want to make it sound like, you know, I was like abused. But, you know, growing up, and I think it's a different time now than it was then, you know, there's definitely like spanking and being slapped. And sometimes I thought like, wow, I don't think I'm that bad. Like, I don't think I deserve that this much. And I think that had a profound impact on me. So the physical side of it, the verbal side of it, you know, the relationship with my mom and my dad, which now is better, luckily. But even like witnessing that set me up for a lot of difficult times in relationships with myself and with partners, because I just saw myself mimicking that same pattern. And, you know, like I said, it wasn't until I grew up and I started looking back on my life that I began to understand that, like, wow, maybe they were going through some really tough times. You know, maybe my dad was struggling with something that he wasn't able to communicate. And maybe that like led to his, you know, lashing out on other people because he didn't know how to find it in himself to deal with those problems. And that was like a huge thing for me. Just having that compassion and being able to forgive him and, you know, being able to forgive myself for the things that I may have done that might have led to that stuff. And those things are like really key to my development, not so much when I was a kid, but my development now, because I've already lived, you know, that childhood life. And so looking back, it's really helped to shape who I am, you know, just that whole thing.
Yeah. I like what you said. Like you at the start of it, you're like, look, I had what I needed. I had clothes on my back. I had food on the table. I think it's common for people to disregard their story because it's not as bad as someone else's, right? And that's like, it's almost like we deny our experience because we're comparing it to someone else's. And I think one of the first things that's like the most powerful is like actually acknowledging your story, like seeing that it matters, that you matter, and that what you experience and the feelings and the emotions and everything that you've gone through, that it all belongs. And it, you know, instead of saying, because I hear this a lot, like, oh, I had what I needed, this or that. And it's almost like sometimes people use that as an excuse to just not deal with the stuff, that the hurts that are there, you know, because none of us goes through life unscathed. We all have experiences that affect us tremendously. And I think I love this part of the conversation because that's why I want to also get people involved in, right? It's like not comparing your story to someone else's, but really just having the curiosity and the courage to look inward to yours, because that's like the toughest one to really look at. It's easy to look and observe other people's lives and to judge and kind of give advice about what other people are doing. It is work, and it takes a lot of courage to actually go inward instead. So very cool. I'm glad you brought that up. Having that realization, you know, where you're looking at your father and you're looking at him with fresh eyes. That's something that I try to practice often. It's this concept of being able to view people and view things with fresh eyes so that you can find love and compassion, right? Otherwise, if you continue to look at the world through the same lens always, you're just gonna carry the same perspective your whole life. So you had, I guess, some defining moments that allowed you to shift how you were seeing things and see your dad and your parents' relationship with new eyes. Can you tell me, what would you say was like the greatest challenge of the perspective you had of your childhood before? Like
Wow.
the most negative effect of what your old perspective was?
That's a deep question. It's a good question. It's a good, deep question. I was seeing myself walk down the path of my father. And not to say that that's a bad thing, because my father is a great, caring, loving, supportive man. But I saw myself going down this path, and this term gets thrown out, you know, hyper masculinity gets thrown out a lot these days. And now it's more towards fragile, you know, fragile masculinity. But that's what I saw myself becoming, was a very masculine-minded man, very authoritative, very dictatorial. It's my way or the highway. And you and I have had conversations about this. I mean, you scolded me our second meeting, right? We were just talking the other day. You scolded me about this, and maybe not scolded, but you definitely gave me an earful, which was what I needed.
I challenged you.
You challenged me.
Yeah.
Yes, which is what we all need. But you know, there was so to answer your question, drugs have been the biggest crux in my life for pretty much my entire life. I started smoking pot and cigarettes when I was probably like 10 years old, 10 or 11 years old. And I continued to abuse pot. You know, and a lot of people don't think, you know, weed's a drug and it's not that serious, but it is. And
it can be, for sure.
It can be abused, and it's a depressant. And so I saw my life unraveling in a negative direction. And then it ended up becoming a cocaine addiction. And once that happened, my life was absolutely off the rails. I had no direction. I had no idea where I was going. I just completely lost sense of what I was supposed to be doing here. And that was probably the biggest defining moment of my life, was when it was like a life or death situation in the hands of.
How old were you then?
I was 27 years old. So January of 2016, in fact, January 16th of 2016, I was homeless. I was sleeping in cars, on couches, really wherever I could. I was going out to bars and trying to, you know, meet women and see if I can go back to their house. It was a really bad time in my life. And I just kind of had enough. And I was contemplating suicide for the first time in my life. And just sleeping in this car, trying to look around to find all the ways that I could just end my life. And I wrote a note in my phone that I still have that's just like, you know, my life is horrible. I'm wasting it. There's tons of people out there that love me and that need the best of me, and I'm letting them all down. And the most important person I'm letting down is myself. And I just like prayed to God, you know, I don't know if I'm going to make it through tonight because I'm really done with this. But if I do, I promise I'll change my entire life. And that was it. I woke up the next day and I stopped it all. I stopped everything. Wow. I didn't drink again. I didn't touch another drug. And now for 4 years, I have been on this path of just getting better and better and better. And to go back to what you said a little bit earlier about like the stories, you know, that we tell ourselves, you know, we all have them. We all have like a narrative, you know, that runs through our heads. And I believe that it's the relatability that we can create with other people that ultimately is what helps one another. You know, we all have something. We're all going through something. We all have problems. Doesn't matter if you're the richest person or your poorest person. They might be different problems, of course, right? But we all have them. And it's important to understand that we're all here together. And we should be helping each other, you know, to become better in whatever capacity.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's that's kind of my whole thing, right? Is to create the relatability. It's not easy to share our stories, but once we find the courage to, we could create harmony and peace and create difference in people's lives in a positive way.
Yeah, I know the narrative that I've, you know, had believed for a long time. And to be honest, it's still something that I have to be very mindful of because I count myself out a lot, that I'm not needed, that I don't add value. So that's the narrative that I've had to overcome. And, you know, it goes back to just, it's what's crazy is it goes back to the most like, just, I don't know, insignificant moments really when you look at it, right? It's like allowing one moment or maybe a handful of moments to decide and to like pretty much like label myself as unworthy for my whole life because of an experience that I had when I was a kid. But that's what we do. This conversation is happening a lot more, and I think people obviously they relate to it, right? And like you said, when we share our stories, there's that relatability there, and you get to see that you're not in this alone, that these things, you know, you find the tools that you need that support you in overcoming those narratives and shifting your life and creating something new for yourself. Oh, I was going to mention, well, one of the things that came up while you were talking about like how we should be looking out for each other and supporting each other, loving each other. It's actually one of the funny stories we have about us when I was sad over a guy. I want to talk about this. So this was when we were in Bali. It is. And I was sad over a guy. And so just to give the audience a little bit of story here. We were living in a homestay that's kind of like an upscaled, upgraded hostel, sort of, you know, in Bali. And so Nelson and I are on the rooftop. There's these little joglos, these individual like wooden kind of structures that were built. They're just like single rooms. So mine had a bathroom. Yours didn't have a bathroom. Yours was just a single like little tiny room. It was cute. But so there's us up top. Nelson is in one of those joglos upstairs next to mine. And I was sad. I was like so sad. And I knew that what I just needed a hug. And I was 10,000 miles away from anybody who was close to me, who knew me, that I could just snuggle up into their arms. So I knocked on Nelson's window and I was like, Nelson, I need a hug. I need you to snuggle me. He's like, no, get out. He was like not feeling it at first. He was like, no. And I was like, I don't care. I just like barged in, and literally this thing is just a bed. There's no room for anything. So I just like barged in his bed, and I was like, I need a snuggle. Like, and really that's all it was. Like, I just needed somebody to give me a bit of like comfort and to feel okay with. It took a lot of courage to like to ask for that, you know, to be like, I need this, to recognize that what I needed and to ask for it was huge. It really did help. Like, it helped to just be there and to talk and to cry. And I wonder what the world would look like if more of us were willing to, well, number one, when we're hurting, ask for help. And then number two, to be the friend who's willing to do the awkward thing of like snuggle someone when they need it, or just hold space for somebody. What would it look like if we were more willing to share that rawness with one another, and for us not to reject people when they were in their most like lowest time, to actually like embrace them. I know it put you in an awkward position. You're like, get out of here. Tell me how that was for you, because I know I just like threw it on you. You weren't about it at first, but then what?
Well, yeah, I wasn't about it at first, and I don't think I still wasn't about it, even when you know, disregarded my wishes and barged into my room. And by barged, I mean slid open my doors and jumped in my bed.
Right. I should probably say, like, you probably shouldn't jump into someone's bed if they say no. Like, you probably shouldn't. But I knew that I wasn't trying to take advantage of you. Like, I was just like heartbroken and like help. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But what you said, the two questions that you asked about, like, you know, what would the world look like? This is the thing, is I knew that I was needed in that moment, to just be a shoulder or to be an ear, anything that you needed, you know, that's what I needed to do. And so despite my own wishes that I had to put to the side, I knew something that you were going through. And it did take a lot of courage for you to do that. And that was something that I recognized, because it's not easy to ask for help. And that's really unfortunate that we've grown up in a society that kind of dictates our feelings and our emotions and tells us what we're supposed to do with them, instead of just saying, like, you should be open to sharing your feelings and emotions. And if you need help, ask for it. And I think the world would look tremendously different if we were able to find courage and do that. And so that was just one of those moments that actually taught me that emotional labor is sometimes needed on both sides of the spectrum, right? And it was a great learning lesson for me, and it actually set me up for success moving forward. A friend of mine, a pretty close friend of mine, her father had passed away maybe like a month and a half ago, and she was in the same position and very distraught, emotionally triggered, obviously from a very traumatic experience. And I asked her, like, do you just, you know, want to come and like cuddle for a little bit? You need a hug? And she gladly obliged, and after was so much better. But I had to be courageous to ask, you know, that. But it's amazing how much, you know, non-sexual physical touch can change, you know, whole person's life in that moment.
Oh my God, yeah. Like a hug is everything. Back in the day
Absolutely.
when it was like the free hugs movement, you know, people just holding signs and giving out free hugs. Story on that, I had been living in LA I think I had been living in LA at that time, maybe 6 years, 4 or 5, I don't know, something like that. Definitely a long time. And was single, hadn't dated anybody in a long time, hadn't seen my family in a long time. At that time too, I was going through my stuff. I have a history of like being like socially, like having social anxiety. So it was really hard for me like to go out and connect with people. And I had one girlfriend of mine who, she was like my saving grace. Like I loved her. She just like clung to me. And if it wasn't for her clinging to me, I don't think I would have had any friends. Like she just like forced her friendship on me. forced me to hold her hand in the car. It was crazy, but I love her to death. But at that time, my mother and dad came to visit me in Los Angeles and we were folding laundry. My mom was folding laundry on my bed. And what she did is she just folded a towel over my legs and pressed into my legs. And I was in so much need of physical touch. I didn't realize. And just feeling her press her hands into my leg, like I just like immediately started crying. And I was just like, I need like that touch. Like that was something that's one of the things that early on that I realized, like physical touch like is something that I need, you know? And even to this day, it's one of the ways that I nurture myself. I do like my inner child work. And when I connect to like my emotions and I get to the root of it and what it is that I need, oftentimes what helps to soothe me and what helps to like just calm my heart is if I like wrap my arms around myself in bed and I just like squeeze myself and I tell myself that, I just let myself know that it's okay and that I'm loved, but that physical like holding myself like really helps. So yeah.
Definitely. I've got two things to say to that. The first one is a question for you. Your friend that forced her friendship onto you, did she know that you were in need of that? Did you express something to her, or is it just something that she intuitively did?
I think it's just something she intuitively did. I don't think it was ever obvious to people. I suffered with that alone. Like I think people oftentimes have a hard time getting that about me. They're like, but what do you mean you're an introvert? You love talking to people, but I'm a straight up introvert. Like I need to be alone to get energized and stuff. And then they have a hard time believing that like socially that I had this type of anxiety. For me, it was just that I would get ready, I would be invited to places, I would probably try on like 50 different outfits, never feel good enough in any of them. When I finally did feel good in one, I'd like have car keys in hand, about to leave the door, and I'd just be like, no. Or I would get to the place, sit outside in my car and not go. Or go inside for like 2 minutes, pay the cover, pay whatever, look around, feel super anxious, and just ghost and leave. People didn't really know that was happening, with me inside. And my girlfriend, her name is Laura. She just intuitively did that. And I thank God for her. I really believe that she was a gift from heaven to me, because through her friendship is where, I kind of like broke out of my shell a little bit. I had my wingman. It felt safer to go places because I had her, and it helped me so much. Yeah.
The question was not so much a question, but just a statement. To like go back to childhood experiences that you had touched on, and then the stories that we tell ourselves surrounding physical touch, and how, sometimes we have, obviously women more than men, negative traumatic experiences around touch. And it's really sad that this is a thing that's still going on today, but that just sets us up for like a negative domino effect that pushes us further and further away from letting ourselves be open and be vulnerable and be courageous to non-sexual physical touch, which is essentially what it is. Being open to love, a loving touch that means nothing besides just like, I'm here for you. And that whole thing, that stigma, whatever you want to call it, is setting us up for even, further demise as a society, because we need physical touch. I mean, physical touch is a huge release of very powerful hormones for us that are very productive. And even when it comes to, immunoregulatory potential, especially now when we're all kind of in this COVID pandemic lockdown, self-quarantine, whatever you want to call it, denying ourselves from other people.
Yeah.
And it's really doing damage to us. And it's really unfortunate that, we're being told to, but this is my opinion, being told to stay home, to stay away from people.
Yeah.
And embrace is what we need right now, you know, without the fear of something happening, which is exactly what it is, right? And so, yeah, just based off of what you said, and seeing you in Bali, it seemed like you had taken steps past that kind of narrative in your mind, right? You became more of an extrovert as much as you could, because I'm an introvert too, naturally, so I understand. But you definitely got out of your shell, and it seemed like you were always doing something.
Yeah, for me, the starting point for my transformation was probably like 6 years ago. Some friends invited me to go to this like weekend it wasn't even a retreat because it was in LA. It wasn't like I was staying there, but it was like a 3-day intensive course on, it's called Breakthrough. And it just touched on all of this, like, you know, those stories, that narrative that we create when we're kids, and the story that we're telling and believing about ourselves, and how to just recognize it when it's occurring in our life, to take away the power of that story or that moment, that one thing that has shaped your whole life. It just helped to look at the relationship between like myself and my parents, what that was like, and how it's influenced, you know, it was influencing me at that moment. And one of the key takeaways that I took from that was that I wasn't counting myself in. I didn't think that I mattered to anybody. Like I really felt like I just didn't add any value to anything. And so that really showed me, that was the key takeaway. It was like that you mattered, you know, that people were drawn to me, that I brought energy that added value to a group, and that without me there, that, you know, that the world was missing out, you know, and I wasn't seeing that before. And so, and then I also got really just in touch with that story that that I didn't matter. So when I would show up in groups and that story started playing in my head, I was able to go, oh no, this isn't actually true. Right now, what you're feeling is you just feel, you know, when you were 8 years old or whatever, and you have that story. Yeah. And I would be able to, in the moment, be able to take myself out of that feeling and say, these are your friends. They love you. I would have to do it from a distance at first. And it's like this thing I had to just practice until it became real, and then until it wasn't something that I carried around all the time, you know? And so it really helped me. It really helped in group settings, meeting new people. In fact, when I went to Bali, that was one of my biggest fears. And I remember writing about this before I left. Like, I was afraid that I was going to get to Bali and that all that work I had done was going to go straight out the window, and that I was just going to turn into this hermit and go back to my old ways and have a really, really difficult time. But thankfully it didn't. Like it stuck, and it was good.
That's so powerful. Like the whole notion of self-worth, self-value, self-identity, and how, you know, it's like 99% of it is tied to like 1 or 2 childhood experiences that just stick with us. And then we begin to, you know, rerun this story in our head. That becomes our subconscious narrative, and then our subconscious is what actually becomes our reality, right? Because it's what we're doing every single day. And then we try to do things to affirm like what we already feel about ourselves. And that alone sets us up for very problematic experiences, because we are not that 1 or 2 experiences. You know, we are so much more than that. Just like you had mentioned, you know, your friends love you. You have something to offer. You have something that you bring to this earth. And that's a very positive thing. And you could share that, and you could positively impact people's lives. And that is tremendous. That's what we need.
Yeah.
Right. That is incredible. And then, yeah, you got to Bali, and you were definitely not a hermit. That work that you did paid off.
It has,
you know,
absolutely.
Exponentially. And now look at you.
Yeah, no, really. I am so grateful for the work and the all of the different practices that I've picked up along the way. I get asked often, like on social media, you're so happy all the time. Like, what is it, this or that? I'm like, first, I'm not happy all the time, but I do feel very much like in control of my emotions. Like I understand them. I'm not afraid of what I'm feeling. I'm not afraid of getting quiet with myself and like going and checking in and seeing like what my heart space is looking like and what hurts, and just going there. Like it is what helps keep me positive, what helps me, I think it helps bring connection, right? It's like the story that I was telling myself, and maybe, if you agree, like, let me know how it shows up for you or how it has shown up for you. But when we have those stories, all that does is create like blockages. It like keeps people in a distance. It keeps us from connection, and we just keep pushing others away from us, and we just wall ourselves in. But when we like kind of investigate what's going on in there, like it just frees up all that energy that blocks connection, and then I could show up and I can connect to a stranger. I can connect to a group of people, whether it's like really beautiful women where, in the past I would have felt like insignificant, and just be able to connect to them on a whole different like heart level, instead of like what the outside looks like. But for me, yeah, it just has provided connection to people, which is something that I always craved, but was so stuck in my head, wasn't able to have. What about for you?
Yeah, I could relate completely with that in terms of like insecurities and not being enough and playing the comparison game and not creating relatability and further building barriers against things. And I think that's so significant in our lives is we build barriers against things. Like one of my, I have tons of favorite quotes. One of them is a Rumi quote. And I'm going to boss this, but it's like, oh my gosh, now I got to think about how it actually goes. But it's like our path is not to seek for love, but to break down the barriers that we've built against it.
Okay. I'm going to look it up. Keep talking.
Yeah. And let me know what it is. Something like that. But we build barriers against things. And as we build these barriers, they become more prominent in our lives. We build barriers against love. We build barriers against financial abundance. We build barriers against physical fitness. We build barriers against, away from our parents, away from ourselves, which is, in my opinion, the most important one. Because we are the only, like, we got one body, and we should value it and we should treasure it and we should treat it well. And comparing ourselves to other people gets us completely detached from who we are, our grounded and centeredness. And so, like, I am right there with you. I have peeled back a multitude of layers of my proverbial onion to get to the core of why I am. And then from there, I was able to figure out, well, who do I want to be? Not who am I, but who do I want to be? Not because America or, any society tells me what to be, not because my parents told me that or because I saw, my brother and sister turn out to be who they are, but who do I want to be? And how do I want to show up for the world? Yeah. And then I started to live that life. And then that life became the life that I live now,
Ooh, so tell me about that. Tell me about the life you're leading now and how it looks different from before. Like, what are the major differences?
Well, the life doesn't really look that different than the life I lived before. It just is different in the sense of I cut out the things that were killing me, and I implemented the things that brought me love, brought me life, brought me joy. I am driven by a purpose, and like it's been the biggest driving force in my life for all of my life is purpose. Is just to feel like I'm of service, that I could help people. And it was originally driven by curiosity. And so when people ask like, oh, how do you find your purpose? Maybe you shouldn't be thinking so much of your purpose, but instead, what are you curious about? What are the things that you are genuinely curious about learning? And then through that curiosity, it will help to find like your path and your purpose in life. because we could all get stuck in the search party of like, why am I here? What am I doing? And then it becomes a very existential self in self conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't really end too well. And so my life now is just about service, about providing positivity in people's life, happiness, love, joy, and the things that you said. It's not like an everyday thing. Like I'm not happy every day, but I have very essential practices, and I have a game plan. Like if I'm unhappy, I have a game plan in place that's gonna chipper me up real quick, and get me back in line, um, to being, who I need to be for the people around me, which is an inspiration. That was the biggest thing for me is to be an inspiration. I got this tattoo. It's the only tattoo I have, and it's kind of cliche, but it just says inspire. And I got it right when I had gotten sober. Is a constant reminder of what I'm doing here is to stay inspired myself by the people that I surround myself with, and to continue to inspire other people on their path in life. And as long as we could all be inspired to be better people, we could do it. We can create the life that we want to live for ourselves and for people around us.
Yeah. I love what you do. You definitely inspire people. You are vegan, and you have a mission there, and you educate people on nutrition, and you're a very good cook. I was always impressed by the meals that you would throw down in that tiny little kitchen in Bali. We had this ghetto kitchen, okay? We probably had one pot, one pan, and I think a kitchen like spoon to work with where we were living.
It was like
the best picture of this
burner. It was a 2-burner like a campfire stove powered by a propane tank, and it was very, very minimal.
And he was throwing down. You were throwing down. So you inspire people into, for you, I know a lot of it is just being healthy, taking care of your body. You do it through what you eat and through fitness, right?
Yes, somewhat. My body is a reflection of more so my mindset than it is of just, how I look or what I do to look this way. I'm perpetually trying to get better in every way. And that doesn't look like this straight, linear progression. It's always going to be in up and down. And I think that's very important for people to understand, is that there is no straight line to success. There's no straight line to, that ideal body, or the job, or the husband or wife, or the white picket fence house, whatever it is. There's no straight line to that. There's going to be struggle. There's going to be sacrifice. But those struggles and sacrifices are so important on the path, because it makes it all the more wild. How worthwhile that is just so tremendous. And so, like, for me, it's my mindset. It's my spirituality. It's the people that I surround myself with. There's the physical component to it. But they all have to converge in alignment, with my life, or else I'm living a life out of alignment. And if I'm living a life out of alignment, then I'm going to come across far more negativity than I would if I was just like, you know what, I'm going to make a decision and I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no plan B or plan C for me. And anybody that knows me would be like, this guy, he's got like one thing, and that's it. There's plan A. And if plan A doesn't work, I don't know what I'm going to do, because that's it. I make a decision and I go, like it's raining here today, and I wanted to go for a big bike ride this morning. And I don't like riding my bike in the rain, but I knew that I had to do something. So I was like, well, I got to do it. So I put my shoes on, I put a sweater and a hat on, and I went for like a 4.5 mile. And that was it. Those are the things that I have to do. They're called irrevocable decisions, and I really love that term. Irrevocable decisions, right? Decisions that we can't go back on, right? Like if I make a decision, I have to do it. I'm not going to procrastinate on it. I'm not going to say, oh, tomorrow I'll do this. No, I'm going to do it. And the more that I do that, I find myself perpetually getting into the groove of like, man, I really don't feel like doing anything today, but I could at least do something. You know, I could do 10 air squats or 10 push-ups, or I can go for a walk. Doesn't matter. You know, I could still meditate. I could still write. I could still read a little bit, right? And those are gifts that I cherish, you know, tremendously. And
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
it.
And everything we do and everything we have is from a choice, you know.
Yeah.
We can look at our circumstances and the results we're getting in our life, whatever it is, whether you're happy or you're upset with the way your reality, it's all a choice that you've made. Like, that's number one, like acknowledging the responsibility of your choice. And if you're unhappy, it's because you're choosing to be unhappy in some sort of circumstance. You're choosing to ignore the things that are hurting you, or not, you know, you're choosing whatever. And that's it. Like, choice is so powerful. People waste time just trying to figure things out, instead of just choosing, you know, like choose and then figure out, choose and then seek out the information. Like, yeah, choose that you're going to make this a priority in your life. I think that really is what differentiates people who are on a path of like self-realization versus others who are just kind of going through the motions, upset with life, not really finding any joy or passion in it, just feeling about everything, because they haven't made a choice about any one thing. And so it's just the only choice they're making is that they're sort of, they throw hands up about life and they're like, well, whatever.
Exactly. And then they get stuck in that like, this is just how my life is. This is it. This is what happens when you get old, or, you know, when you, whatever the excuse is, we essentially fall in love with that, but that's not true. You know, not true at all. And there's the whole, like, you know, inspiration leads to motivation, and motivation leads to action. That's not true. Action is what leads, and then it's just this positive cycle, and then it just goes and goes and goes. You know.
Yeah, you have to know. You have to just have action. You have to have your choice first. You have to know what your decision is. It has to be made, because when you lack motivation, then what? You're not going to act. You're not going to do. But if you're committed to the act of doing, then you will have the motivation on those days where you're just feeling kind of shitty and things, you don't want to do things. You don't want to get up. You don't want to go for the run. You don't want to work on yourself, or you know, communicate or your needs or whatever. Like, but when you're committed to, no, this is what I'm committing to now. For me, speaking my voice is like, that's something, a choice that I'm committed to right now. No matter how uncomfortable it makes me, no matter like the sweat that comes from my armpits, or the tightness in my throat because whatever I'm speaking of like makes me like completely nervous, or especially vulnerability and like sharing my heart and sharing my feelings. What I've been realizing lately is that I am all about love, right? You know, it's about me. I'm just like, I want to love. I think love is what unites us. Love is the most powerful act or choice you could ever make. And then there's a little part of me that is terrified of love, like terrified of like sharing love with somebody. And I've really recognized that lately, and it has really caused my relationships to suffer, because inside, like, I've just been so terrified of that vulnerability of loving somebody and being loved by them and letting someone love me. And so right now where I'm at is I am just so committed to sharing that, no matter what. Like, even if it just makes my armpits sweat, like I'm just bringing the subject up, and I'm like, so that's something that I'm committed to. And it's not easy having the conversations. One of them I had with my dad at the end of last year, because our relationship was like shit at that time. But it was having the courage to sit and talk and say, hey, this is how I feel. I love you, but I'm hurting right now, and communicating like what my needs were there. That was a difficult conversation to have, but it led to a lot of like breakthrough. I find myself right now that that's where my commitment is to really sharing my voice and sharing my truth, my feelings, in a responsible way too.
Yeah, definitely. It's very, the whole like responsibility and choice making conversation is very triggering to some people. Like, it's a huge trigger subject, but it's the truth. we make choices, and we have to be responsible for those choices, whether good or bad. And we have to have the courage to discuss them. That was the story that you just shared right now is what you were telling me, last week or whenever we last talked about how pivotal that was for you to have that conversation with your father, to tell him what was going on. No matter how uncomfortable you felt or how difficult it was or how much you were sweating or whatever you were feeling, right? But that is that's the growth right there. The growth is in being uncomfortable, right? It's not being comfortable, because whenever we're comfortable, we're just staying in that little bubble of like, oh, everything's great. But nah, sometimes things aren't great, right? Sometimes things really suck. And we have to be able to discuss that with the people that they suck with to figure out why. Or else we're just in our heads assuming, oh, maybe this sucks because of this or maybe it's that. But no, it's none of those things until we talk about it, right? The uncomfortability, if that's even a word, uncomfortability, if it's not, it should be.
We just
But
made
the
it up.
uncomfortability of things is where we actually, that's it. We're making words up today. That's the first one. We should keep going. But yeah, we need to be uncomfortable to actually grow. And that's everything, being uncomfortable.
I do want to bring up, because we can't film this, we can't have this podcast without our Mad Pops talk.
The Mad Pops conversation. Do we have to talk about this?
I mean, we don't have to. I'd like to.
No,
I thought it was a very powerful moment for you. You mentioned it early on. Our second time meeting each other, we went out for ice cream, and I think we were hanging out somewhere else before that, and then we went out for ice cream. And you were planning to go home, and you had some strong feelings about going back home to see your family for Christmas. This was around like what you guys were going to be eating, because you were very much like vegan, healthy kick, family nut, and you had some strong feelings about that. And then I challenged you. Go ahead.
You did. You challenged me big time on that, and that was such that challenge. That the way that you challenged me that day was really eye opening for me. So to go back to what I said before is, the hyper masculinity, like it's my way or the highway. This is it. My word goes. It doesn't work. And I'm going to say this to any man that watches this is do not let your masculinity be built on previous masculinity, because once one of them goes, the whole thing goes. It just crumbles, and it crumbles like that. We need to be balanced men, between masculinity and femininity, being strong and being soft, being nurturing and being whatever the opposite of not nurturing is. I don't know, but we need to have both sides of that spectrum. And so the conversation that we had was around the food choices that my family was making at that time. And so this was 2018, the end of 2018, going home for Christmas. And I was very mad because, at that time my family wasn't very healthy. Just a little backstory. My sister has had breast cancer twice now. My father has had a stroke. This was right around the time that my uncle had passed away from a heart attack. 3 of my grandparents had died, all from something related to heart disease. Every person in my life that has died, that is of my family, whether extended or, my close family, has died of some form of cancer or heart disease. And that's really serious to me. And that's a big inspiration for why I live the life I live in terms of health and fitness.
Yeah.
But going home that time, I was like, if they're not going to eat vegan food, then I'm not even going to eat at the table with them. I don't even want to be around them. I might just make my own food, go do my own thing and stand for what I believe is right. And you had challenged me on that. Like, how is that going to help the situation? How is that leading with love? How is that, going to inspire them to be better? Because aren't you just building a barrier against, back to the barrier thing, aren't you just building a barrier between you and your family?
Yeah.
And I was still so gung-ho. I was like, what does this woman know? This is the second or third time we've hung out. She doesn't know me. She doesn't have the right to tell me this. That's so dumb stories also, right?
I just remember you being so adamant that you were not going to be at the dinner table. If you were just like, so strong headed or whatever in that moment. Like, it didn't make sense to me. For me, it was like, how is having that attitude and that mindset, being so strong-headed there, and it's my way or no way, how is that going to actually get you what you want? Because you wanted to see your family eating better, and I know that your heart in it was good. Like, you want them to be healthy because you care about them, but your method of communicating that was so strong. I was like, that's just going to push people away. Like, how does that invite them to the table with you? That just, if I were in your family, I'd be like, screw you. I don't want anything to do with you. I'm not trying to be around you.
Exactly. And you know, that was a serious thing for me. And it's been a serious thing for me. Leading up to that point was the way that you just put it, like inviting people to the table. Like, I say seldom in my life have I actually invited people to the table. Rather, I would go with the approach of like, you're either going to come eat with me or screw you and go do your own thing.
Yeah.
And it didn't work. You know, it didn't work. It pushed people away from me. It pushed me further away from myself. Bad times with family and relationships set me up for failure, straight failure.
Yeah.
But that was one of those times. And you called me on my BS. I went home, and lo and behold, there was a vegan dinner. No one knew that I was coming home. It was a complete surprise. I didn't tell one person.
Wow.
My sister knew actually, but no one else knew. And I got home, and there was a vegan dinner sitting there waiting for me. And see, I didn't even have to do that. And this is what comes into like belief and faith and just letting go of outcomes, you know, and just putting it out there. Like, this is what I want, you know. And it happens when we get out of our own way, when we give up everything and just let it happen. It just unfolds and unfolds and unfolds. And that was just a beautiful example of, you know, not demanding, just letting it happen. And it did beautifully.
That's good. There is in the Christian like Bible, when it comes to love, that's actually one of the descriptions of what love is. I think it's in the book of Chronicles or something, when it talks about like love is. You probably have read it. It's like very much like a highly quoted like verse in the Bible. But that's actually one of the verses, or one of the parts of that description of love that stands out to me the most, is it says love doesn't demand its way. And I have held on to that so much. Like, love doesn't demand. It just doesn't demand. And like, I've been in situations where I wanted to force my way. I wanted to have my way. And that verse has always like helped to, just like I said, like see things with fresh eyes. Like, where am I demanding right now? And is that love? If I want to be a person that really lives their life with love, being led by love, then that verse always checks me. It's like, what am I demanding right here? Am I forcing my way? And is there a way that I can just like ease up a bit? So, well, we are coming up towards the end of our little session here. I really, really, really love all the things that we've shared. Tell me if there is anything else you want to add.
One thing, just a little thing. When it comes to, you know, peeling back the layers of ourselves or the barriers that we've created against things, there's a quote, and I'm not bringing this up just because you brought up a Christian quote from the Bible, but there's a quote in the Bhagavad Gita that says, "Curving within myself, I create again and again." And that, I have no idea where I heard that, but it's been at least like 5 or 6 years plus that you know came into my ethos. And it has stuck with me so much in terms of like, every time I could question myself and get deeper in myself, I come to another answer, another conclusion. And the more I do that, the more I get out of my mind, I get out of my identity, my belief system, and I begin to create my own truth, my own wisdom, my own love. And that has been such a guiding force for me in terms of like just opening up and finding courage to continue to open up and to, not force people, like you were just saying, what love doesn't do, not force people to open up for themselves, but to be like the inspiration and to let them know, if you are going through something, if you feel like there's a part of your life that is closed off, I am here for you.
Mm-hmm.
Do whatever you need, whether it's listen or hug or snuggle. It doesn't matter. But that's what I'm here to do. And that's what we are all here to do. It is not I am my brother or sister's keeper. I believe it's more so of like, I am my brother and teacher, or I am my brother and sister's teacher. We are each other's teachers, each other's mentors. And the more we could learn from one another, not just what can I teach this person, but what can I learn from this person? What can I learn from this experience? And we will just proliferate in such a positive way going forward, because that's what we need tremendously is love. It is truly the answer.
I agree 100%. Well, Nelson, I am so grateful for you to have you on as a guest. Thank you so much. You're an important person to me, and thank you for sharing your story and being vulnerable here. Anything you want to share, like where we can find you on the Instagram, or even like what you do? Go ahead and share with us.
Yeah. So you can find me Instagram. My handle is Vegan Cheat Codes, spelled just how it sounds, Vegan Cheat Codes. I am a kinesiologist, a personal trainer, a plant-based nutritional consultant, and a mindset growth coach. I'm here just to help people become the best versions of themselves possible, across the board. And feel free to reach out, message me, anything. I'm always here to be.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being on the show. I'm gonna
Thank you
pause
so much,
this
Cynthia.
recording real quick.